Imagine waking up in Kirkenes, a remote town in Norway's far northeast. On the map, you are further east than Istanbul, yet still within Norway's borders. Drive just 15 minutes and you'll cross into Russia. This unusual spot highlights one of the strangest quirks in Northern Europe. Despite being the smallest of the three big Nordic nations, Norway holds the entire Arctic coastline. Sweden and Finland, both larger in land area, are completely cut off. For centuries, wars, shifting alliances, and raw geography have kept things this way. What once seemed like a minor detail has turned into a jackpot. Today, with melting ice caps, untapped resources, and new global shipping routes, Norway's monopoly on Arctic waters could reshape the future of Scandinavia. Was this destiny, luck, or the failure of Sweden and Finland to seize their chance? If you enjoy stories like this, consider subscribing for more. Stretching for more than 1,100 miles, the Scandinavian mountains form one of Europe's longest continuous ranges. To put that in perspective, it's roughly the distance from New York to Kansas City. These mountains carve a massive wall between Norway and its neighbors, Sweden and Finland, and they've played a central role in shaping the region's borders. The climate here is brutal. Winter temperatures regularly plunge to minus 15 degrees Celsius and can drop below minus 30 degrees Celsius in the higher plateaus. In some places, if you throw boiling water into the air, it freezes before touching the ground. For centuries, these conditions turned the northern borderlands into a natural fortress, discouraging large-scale settlement or military campaigns across them. But Norway had one decisive advantage: the sea. Norwegian sailors could bypass these frozen ridges in days, establishing fishing villages and trading posts along the Arctic coast. Sweden and Finland, by contrast, faced weeks of dangerous land journeys through ice-clogged passes. This simple geographical difference gave Norway a head start in claiming and holding on to Arctic territory. To understand why Sweden and Finland never fought harder for Arctic territory, you need to look at where people actually lived. In Sweden, an overwhelming 91% of the population has historically settled in the south and central regions. Finland's pattern is even more extreme. 97% live in the lower half of the country, leaving only a tiny 3% in the far north. This imbalance wasn't just about preference. Geography and climate made the decision for them. The southern lowlands are flatter, milder, and better for farming, while the north is locked in long winters with temperatures plunging below minus 20 degrees Celsius. Settling there meant isolation, hardship, and little economic payoff. Both Stockholm and Helsinki developed as Baltic cities, their trade networks facing Europe and Russia across the Baltic Sea. By contrast, the Arctic coast connected only to sparsely populated Russian territories. For Sweden and Finland, it was obvious where to focus their attention: the south. Meanwhile, Norway quietly cemented its grip on the north. Before we continue with the video and my further explanation about subject, I want to ask for your help. I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe and help me out. Okay, let's continue. When Sweden broke from the Kalmar Union in 1523, it faced a problem. All ships bound for Western Europe had to pass through Danish waters at the Sound, where heavy tolls drained profits. Frustrated, King Charles IX launched a bold plan in 1611 to seize Finnmark in northern Norway and gain direct access to the Arctic Ocean. Denmark and Norway rejected the claim, and the Kalmar War began. After 2 years of fighting, Sweden failed. Though it secured free passage through the Sound, its hopes for an Arctic coastline were crushed, leaving Norway firmly in control of the north. 2 centuries later, Europe was once again in chaos. The Napoleonic Wars of the early 1800s shook the continent and redrew borders far beyond France. Scandinavia was no exception. Sweden aligned itself with Britain against Napoleon, while Denmark and Norway sided with France. that choice would prove disastrous for Denmark-Norway. While Sweden fought abroad, Russia seized the opportunity to invade Finland in 1809, ending nearly 700 years of Swedish rule there. Losing Finland was a national trauma, and Sweden scrambled to find compensation. Their eyes turned westward toward Norway. When Napoleon finally fell, the victors gathered to reorganize Europe. At the Treaty of Kiel in 1814, Denmark was forced to surrender territory. Instead of ceding its own land, Denmark handed over Norway as a bargaining chip. The Norwegians were outraged, declaring independence and drafting their own constitution. Sweden responded with an army, but Norway resisted fiercely enough to force compromise. The result was a personal union. Norway entered into a partnership with Sweden but retained its own constitution and parliament. This uneasy arrangement lasted until 1905, when Norway peacefully broke free. By then, the map of Scandinavia looked much as it does today, with Norway holding the Arctic prize. For a short time, Finland had what it always lacked: access to the Arctic Ocean. After independence in 1917, the 1920 Treaty of Tartu granted it the Petsamo region, complete with an ice-free port and valuable nickel deposits. The area quickly became vital, with a new Arctic Ocean highway and booming mining industry. But the dream was brief. During World War II, Soviet forces seized Petsamo in 1944, and the 1947 Paris Peace Agreement made the loss permanent. The nickel mines and strategic coastline were absorbed into the USSR, ending Finland's only chance at becoming an Arctic power. Norway's refusal to join the EU in 1972 and 1994 was no accident. Keeping full control of its fisheries mattered more than integration. Those waters still sustain coastal communities, but the real transformation came with oil and gas. Offshore discoveries in the North and Barents Seas turned Norway into Europe's energy powerhouse. By 2024, nearly half of Germany's gas came from Norwegian fields, giving Oslo major leverage. Instead of squandering this wealth, Norway created the world's largest sovereign fund, now worth over $1.4 trillion. Had Sweden or Finland gained Arctic coasts, they too might have shared in this energy-driven fortune. The Arctic is warming at roughly twice the global average, and for Norway, that means opportunity. Beneath the seabed may lie 22% of the world's undiscovered oil and gas. Melting ice is also opening faster routes between Europe and Asia. The Northeast Passage could cut journeys by up to 40%. By 2050, experts predict around 5% of global trade could move through Arctic waters. China has already declared itself a near-Arctic state, investing in ice-ready ships. Norway, hosting the Arctic Council's headquarters in Tromsø, sits at the center of this shift, while Sweden and Finland remain observers without territory. Behind the grand strategies and resource debates lies a human story. The Sami, the indigenous people of northern Scandinavia, have lived across these lands for thousands of years. Traditionally nomadic, many relied on reindeer herding, fishing, and seasonal migration routes that ignored the borders imposed by distant governments. Norway's control of the Arctic coastline has placed Sami communities under unique pressures: oil exploration, mining projects, and the prospect of new shipping lanes all cut into traditional grazing lands and disrupt cultural practices. For the Sami, the Arctic is not an economic prize but a homeland. Had Sweden or Finland secured Arctic coasts, different legal frameworks might have shaped Sami rights. Instead, their fate remains tied largely to Norway's policies. History is filled with what-ifs, and Scandinavia's Arctic story is no exception. Imagine if Sweden had succeeded in seizing Finnmark during the Kalmar War of 1611. With Arctic harbors in its possession, Sweden might have built a dual identity, Baltic and Arctic, balancing two seas instead of just one. Its role in European trade and security could have been far greater. Or consider Finland. If Petsamo had remained Finnish after World War II, the country would have enjoyed a permanent Arctic port and reduced reliance on the vulnerable Baltic routes, always under Russian pressure. Access to Arctic resources might also have boosted its economy. Instead, both nations turned south, leaving Norway to dominate the north alone. Today, all three Nordic states, Norway, Sweden, and Finland, stand together as NATO members. Yet Norway's Arctic coastline gives it a special strategic weight within the alliance. Control of these waters offers access to vital shipping lanes, energy resources, and forward positions close to Russia's northern fleet. For Sweden and Finland, NATO membership secures their defense but does not erase their geographic limits. Without direct Arctic ports, they remain dependent on Baltic access routes, which are more vulnerable to Russian influence. As the Arctic grows in global importance, Norway's role inside NATO will only increase. Its coastline is not just a national asset, it is now a critical frontier for the entire alliance. Norway's monopoly over the Arctic coast is not an accident. It is the outcome of mountains, wars, and centuries of shifting borders. While Sweden and Finland concentrated on the fertile south and profitable Baltic trade, Norway turned seaward, anchoring itself in the harsh north. That decision has shaped its destiny. Today, oil wealth, fisheries, and the promise of new shipping routes make Arctic access more valuable than ever. Norway enjoys influence far beyond its size, while its neighbors watch from the sidelines. Could history have unfolded differently? Perhaps, but geography has a way of deciding winners. And in Scandinavia, it is Norway that holds the key to the Arctic future.